2 years had passed since Justice Harrison's verdict, and Elena's life had transformed in ways she could never have anticipated. The woman who had once faced potential disgrace and dismissal now held one of the most respected positions within the royal security establishment. Her office in the palace's administrative wing reflected her new role as senior advisor for tactical security assessment, a position created specifically to capitalize on her unique experience and proven judgment. The morning briefing that would change everything began like dozens of others. Elena sat at the polished conference table in the secure briefing room, surrounded by representatives from various security services. Commander Richards, now retired, had been replaced by Commander Sarah Chun, a younger officer whose respect for Elena's expertise was evident in their professional relationship. "Ladies and gentlemen," Commander Chun began, "we have received intelligence about a potential threat to the upcoming Commonwealth Summit. The information comes from multiple sources and suggests a coordinated effort to disrupt the proceedings through both cyber and physical means." Elena listened carefully as analysts presented details about intercepts communications, suspicious financial transactions, and the movement of known operatives into London. The emerging picture suggested something far more sophisticated than the surveillance operation she had disrupted 2 years earlier. The threat appears to involve at least 3 separate cells, the intelligence briefer continued, each targeting different aspects of summit security. One group focuses on communications infrastructure, another on physical access to venues, and the third on what our analysts believe might be attempts to compromise security personnel themselves. This last element caught Elena's particular attention. The idea that hostile services might be targeting the security force itself represented a new level of sophistication that demanded careful analysis. Her experience with foreign operatives had taught her to think beyond conventional threat scenarios. Senior Advisor Reeves, Commander Chin addressed Elena directly. "Given your experience with foreign intelligence operations, what's your assessment of the threat profile we're seeing?" Elena had learned to trust her analytical instincts even more since her vindication in court. The patterns emerging from the intelligence briefing triggered recognition based on her previous encounter with sophisticated surveillance operations. "Commander," Elena replied, "the multi-vector approach suggests state-level resources and planning. The timeline coinciding with the Commonwealth Summit indicates political rather than criminal objectives. Most concerning is the apparent focus on compromising our own personnel, which could provide insider access to our security arrangements." The room's attention focused on Elena as she continued her analysis. Her reputation for sound judgment had made her assessments highly valued in these strategic discussions. "I recommend we consider this a test of lessons learned from previous incidents," Elena suggested. "Our protocols have evolved significantly, but this threat profile will challenge both our formal procedures and our ability to adapt when circumstances demand flexibility." Commander Chin nodded approvingly. "Exactly what I was hoping you'd say. We're implementing enhanced security measures across all venues, but I want you to lead a special assessment team focused on identifying vulnerabilities that conventional approaches might miss." Elena felt the familiar combination of excitement and apprehension that accompanied high-stakes security operations. Her new role had prepared her for this kind of responsibility, but leading a multi-agency assessment team represented a significant expansion of her influence and accountability. The team assigned to Elena included specialists from various services: Detective Inspector Morrison from Counterterrorism, Captain James Sullivan from Military Intelligence, Dr. Rebecca Walsh from the Government Communications Center, and Sergeant Major David Thompson from Special Forces. Each brought unique expertise that would be essential for comprehensive threat assessment. Their first meeting took place in a secure facility beneath Whitehall, surrounded by the electronic countermeasures and physical security that protected the government's most sensitive operations. Elena had become comfortable in such environments, but she remained impressed by the level of trust her new position represented. "Team," Elena began, "our mission is to identify security vulnerabilities that standard procedures might miss. The threat intelligence suggests adversaries who have studied our methods and developed countermeasures. We need to think like they do while maintaining our own operational security." Detective Inspector Morrison, a veteran of numerous counterterrorism operations, spoke first. The intelligence about compromising security personnel particularly concerns me. If they've identified specific individuals to target for recruitment or blackmail, our entire security architecture could be vulnerable. Captain Sullivan agreed. Military intelligence has seen similar approaches in other contexts. The sophistication suggested by the briefing materials indicates professional intelligence services rather than terrorist groups. Their methods will be more subtle and potentially more effective. Dr. Walsh brought a different perspective from her background in communications security. The cyber component of this threat could be designed to support the physical operations rather than replace them. If they can intercept our communications or access our planning databases, they gain advantages that no amount of physical security can overcome. Sergeant Major Thompson, whose Special Forces background provided tactical insights, focused on operational considerations. The key question is whether they're planning disruption or exploitation. Disruption is relatively straightforward to defend against. Exploitation, gathering intelligence while remaining undetected, is much more challenging to prevent. Elena synthesized their perspectives into a comprehensive assessment framework. We need to examine 3 layers of vulnerability: our procedures, our personnel, and our assumptions. The adversaries have clearly studied conventional security approaches, so we need to identify gaps that they might exploit. Over the following weeks, Elena's team conducted the most thorough security review in the Royal Protection Service's history. They examined everything from individual guard rotations to communications protocols, looking for patterns that foreign intelligence services might identify and exploit. The assessment revealed several concerning vulnerabilities. Many security measures had become routine, creating predictable patterns that careful observation could identify. Communications security, while technically sophisticated, relied on procedures that hadn't been updated to address new forms of electronic surveillance. Most troubling, background investigations of security personnel hadn't been designed to detect the subtle approaches that modern intelligence services used for recruitment. Elena's experience with foreign operatives proved invaluable in understanding how adversaries might exploit these vulnerabilities. Her encounter with the surveillance team had taught her to think beyond obvious threats and consider how sophisticated opponents might use legitimate access and credentials to achieve hostile objectives. The team's preliminary report identified dozens of potential vulnerabilities, but Elena insisted on prioritizing them based on likelihood and potential impact. Her court experience had taught her the importance of focusing on the most significant risks rather than attempting to address every theoretical possibility. Commander Chun, Elena reported during their interim briefing, we've identified 3 categories of vulnerability that demand immediate attention. First, predictable patterns in our security deployments that extended observation could map and exploit. Second, communications protocols that sophisticated adversaries might intercept or manipulate. Third, personnel security measures that haven't adapted to modern recruitment techniques. Commander Chin studied the team's analysis carefully. Your recommendations for addressing these vulnerabilities? Elena had prepared comprehensive suggestions based on her team's expertise and her own experience with adapting security measures to unexpected threats. We propose implementing variable deployment patterns that maintain security effectiveness while reducing predictability. Enhanced communications security using protocols designed specifically for this summit. And expanded personnel monitoring focused on detecting recruitment attempts rather than just screening for obvious threats. The implementation of Elena's recommendations required coordination across multiple agencies and significant modifications to established procedures. Her reputation for sound judgment helped overcome institutional resistance to changes that some officials viewed as unnecessary complications. As the Commonwealth Summit approached, Elena found herself at the center of the most complex security operation of her career. Her role had evolved from guard to planner to operational coordinator, requiring skills she had developed through years of practical experience rather than formal training. The summit brought together heads of government from across the Commonwealth, creating a target-rich environment for any adversaries seeking to gather intelligence or demonstrate their capabilities. Elena's team maintained round-the-clock monitoring for signs that the anticipated threats were materializing. On the 3rd day of the summit, Their vigilance was rewarded when Dr. Walsh's communications monitoring detected anomalous electronic signals near the main conference venue. The signals appeared to be attempts to intercept secure communications, confirming that at least part of the intelligence warnings had been accurate. Elena coordinated the response to this discovery, drawing on lessons learned from her previous encounter with foreign operatives. Rather than immediately moving to arrest the suspected surveillance team, she chose to monitor their activities while gathering intelligence about their methods and objectives. "We have an opportunity to learn how they operate," Elena explained to Commander Chen during an emergency briefing. "If we arrest them immediately, we confirm their presence, but lose the chance to understand their full capabilities and intentions." This decision reflected the more sophisticated approach to security that Elena had developed since her court vindication. Instead of simply stopping immediate threats, she now thought in terms of gathering intelligence that could prevent future operations. The surveillance operation Elena coordinated revealed a network of foreign operatives far more extensive than initially suspected. The electronic surveillance team was supported by physical observers, technical specialists, and what appeared to be at least one individual with legitimate access to summit facilities. Over the course of 48 hours, Elena's coordinated monitoring identified 12 individuals involved in various aspects of the intelligence operation. Their methods confirmed the sophisticated approach that the intelligence warnings had suggested, including attempts to compromise communications, map security procedures, and identify personnel who might be vulnerable to recruitment approaches. The decision of when to act against this network became the most challenging aspect of Elena's operational coordination. Moving too early would prevent the operatives from completing their mission but limit intelligence gathering about their methods. Waiting too long risked allowing them to achieve their objectives or escape with valuable information. Elena's experience with split-second decision-making proved valuable in this more complex scenario. After consulting with her team and reviewing all available intelligence, she recommended coordinated arrests designed to capture the network while preserving evidence of their methods and objectives. The operation to apprehend the foreign intelligence network was executed flawlessly, with 12 arrests made simultaneously across London. Elena coordinated from a secure command center, watching as months of preparation and careful monitoring culminated in a significant counterintelligence success. The captured operatives and their equipment provided a treasure trove of intelligence about foreign efforts to penetrate British security operations. Analysis of their materials revealed surveillance techniques, communication methods, and recruitment approaches that would inform security planning for years to come. More immediately, the successful detection and neutralization of the network allowed the Commonwealth Summit to conclude without compromise. World leaders completed their deliberations unaware that their security had been tested by one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations ever directed against British targets. Elena's role in this success brought recognition that extended far beyond the Royal Protection Service. Senior government officials who had initially been skeptical of creating her advisory position now viewed it as essential for addressing modern security challenges. The Prime Minister personally commended Elena's work during a private ceremony at Downing Street. Senior Advisor Reeves, the PM, said, "Your insights and coordination have prevented what could have been a significant compromise of our national security. The Commonwealth Summit's success owes much to your expertise and judgment." Elena accepted the recognition with the same quiet professionalism that had characterized her response to both crisis and vindication. Her journey from controversial guard to respected security expert had taught her that true accomplishment lay in effective service rather than public acknowledgement. The broader implications of the Commonwealth Summit operation continued to unfold as analysts examined the intelligence gathered from the foreign network. Elena found herself consulting with officials from allied nations whose own security arrangements had apparently been targeted by similar operations. Her unique combination of practical experience and analytical expertise made her insights valuable for understanding how foreign intelligence services were adapting their methods to exploit vulnerabilities in modern security arrangements. The lessons learned would influence protection protocols for years to come. 6 months after the summit, Elena received an unexpected invitation to brief NATO security officials about lessons learned from recent counterintelligence operations. Her presentation would contribute to alliance-wide improvements in protection against sophisticated intelligence threats. Standing before military and intelligence officials from across the Atlantic Alliance, Elena reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this point. The woman who had once faced potential disgrace for making an independent decision now advised international partners on adapting security practices to evolving threats. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena began her presentation. Modern security operations require balancing established procedures with tactical flexibility. Our adversaries study our methods and develop countermeasures specifically designed to exploit rigid adherence to predictable patterns. Elena's presentation drew extensively on her experience, from her initial encounter with foreign operatives through her leadership of the Commonwealth Summit Security Assessment. She emphasized the importance of maintaining disciplined procedures while preserving the flexibility to adapt when circumstances demanded innovative responses. The key lesson from our recent operations, Elena continued, is that effective security requires personnel trained to think like their adversaries while maintaining their own professional standards. This demands continuous learning and the courage to make difficult decisions when standard approaches prove inadequate. The international audience was particularly interested in Elena's insights about coordinating multi-agency responses to sophisticated threats. Her experience had taught her that effective counterintelligence required seamless cooperation between organizations with different cultures and procedures. Following her NATO presentation, Elena received invitations to consult with security services in Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, all Commonwealth nations seeking to improve their own capabilities based on lessons learned from recent British operations. These international engagements gave Elena perspective on how her personal journey reflected broader changes in security practices worldwide. The challenges she had navigated were being encountered by professionals across the globe as they adapted to increasingly sophisticated threats. Elena's expertise had also attracted academic attention, with several universities inviting her to speak about the evolution of security practices in the modern era. These engagements allowed her to contribute to the education of future security professionals who would face even more complex challenges. Her presentations at military academies and police colleges emphasized the importance of sound judgment and ethical decision-making in high-pressure situations. Elena used her own experience to illustrate how individual integrity could influence outcomes far beyond immediate circumstances. The decisions you make under pressure will define not only your own career, but potentially the effectiveness of security operations that protect others, Elena would tell groups of young officers. Trust your training, respect established procedures, but never forget that your ultimate obligation is to protect those you serve. Elena's personal life had also evolved significantly since her court vindication. The stress and uncertainty of those difficult months had taught her to value relationships and experiences beyond her professional accomplishments. She had developed closer friendships with colleagues who had supported her during the controversy, and she had begun pursuing interests outside the demanding world of security operations. But her greatest satisfaction came from the knowledge that her experience had contributed to improved security practices that would protect others facing similar challenges. The position she had created and the expertise she had developed would continue benefiting her service long after her own retirement. As Elena approached her 25th year of service, she reflected on the unexpected path her career had taken. The split-second decision to confront foreign operatives had led to months of legal uncertainty, professional vindication, expanded responsibilities, and ultimately international recognition as an expert in modern security challenges. Her story had become part of the institutional memory of the Royal Protection Service and beyond, demonstrating that individual courage and sound judgment could create positive change even in highly structured organizations. Future security professionals would learn from her example about balancing discipline with initiative, following procedures while remaining adaptable, and maintaining integrity when facing difficult choices. Elena's legacy extended beyond her specific accomplishments to the broader principle that effective security required professionals capable of thinking independently while working collaboratively. Her journey from controversy to expertise illustrated how organizations could benefit by recognizing and nurturing such capabilities rather than simply demanding rigid compliance. Looking back on her remarkable career, Elena understood that her most important contribution had been demonstrating that security professionals could serve effectively by combining disciplined training with intelligent adaptation to evolving challenges. This balance would become increasingly important as future threats continued testing the effectiveness of traditional approaches. Elena's story proved that sometimes the greatest service came not from following established patterns but from having the courage to act decisively when circumstances demanded creative responses. Her vindication in court and subsequent professional success had established precedents that would guide and protect other professionals facing similar dilemmas. The royal guard, who had once faced potential disgrace for 30 seconds of independent action, had become an internationally recognized expert whose insights would influence security practices for decades. Elena's transformation demonstrated that individual courage, properly channeled and professionally developed, could create lasting improvements in the systems designed to protect others. As she continued her service with enhanced responsibilities and broader influence, Elena carried forward the lessons learned from her extraordinary journey, that effective protection required both discipline and flexibility, that sound judgment could overcome initial controversy, and that individual integrity could ultimately serve the greater good even when challenging established procedures. Her story would continue inspiring security professionals worldwide, proving that personal courage and professional competence could combine to create positive change even in the most challenging circumstances. Elena had transformed from a guard facing judicial scrutiny into a leader whose expertise would help others navigate the complex challenges of modern security operations. The second day of Elena's hearing began with closing arguments from both sides. The courtroom felt heavier somehow, as if the weight of impending judgment had settled over everyone present. Justice Harrison arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, his expression as unreadable as it had been throughout the previous day's testimony. Colonel Williams rose first, his defense strategy built around painting Elena as a dedicated professional whose actions saved national security. "Your Honor," he began, "this case asks a fundamental question about the nature of duty in the modern world. When faced with an immediate threat to national security, do we expect our most experienced personnel to follow rigid procedures, or do we trust them to use their training and judgment to protect those they have sworn to serve?" Williams paced slowly before the bench, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who genuinely believed in his client's innocence. Sergeant Reeves had 23 years of experience in high-stakes protection work. She had trained continuously in threat assessment, tactical response, and crisis management. When she encountered clear evidence of a security breach in progress, she made a decision based on that expertise. The defense counsel methodically reviewed Elena's service record, emphasizing her consistent reliability and sound judgment throughout her career. This is not a case of reckless disobedience or personal glory-seeking. This is a case of professional competence applied under extreme pressure with successful results. Williams then addressed the technical protocol violations that formed the heart of the prosecution's case. Yes, Sergeant Reeves left her assigned position. Yes, she took action without specific authorization. But protocol exists to serve security, not the reverse. When protocol becomes an obstacle to protecting those we serve, experienced professionals must have the flexibility to adapt. He concluded by emphasizing the successful outcome of Elena's actions. 4 foreign operatives were captured, sophisticated surveillance equipment was confiscated, and a potentially devastating intelligence operation was prevented. The alternative, following protocol while hostile agents completed their mission, would have been a catastrophic failure of our security responsibilities. The prosecution's closing argument took a fundamentally different approach. The young barrister focused relentlessly on the importance of military discipline and the dangerous precedent that acquitting Elena might establish. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "this case is not about the outcome of Sergeant Reeves' actions, however fortunate they may have been. This case is about whether individual members of our security forces can decide for themselves when orders apply and when they can be disregarded." The prosecutor argued that Elena's success in preventing the surveillance operation was irrelevant to the question of her guilt. Military effectiveness depends on coordinated action under unified command. When individuals take matters into their own hands, regardless of their intentions, they undermine the entire structure that makes coordinated protection possible. He painted a hypothetical scenario where multiple guards made similar independent decisions simultaneously, creating chaos rather than enhanced security. If we excuse Sergeant Reeves' actions because they worked out well, what message does that send to other personnel facing difficult decisions? Do we want guards abandoning their posts whenever they think they see something suspicious? The prosecution also emphasized the potential for disaster if Elena's confrontation with the operatives had gone wrong. Sergeant Reeves entered that storage room alone, without backup, facing four potentially armed intruders. If they had been prepared for violent resistance, we might be discussing a very different outcome today: the death of a royal guard and the escape of foreign agents. As both sides completed their arguments, Elena felt the familiar mixture of confidence and anxiety that had preceded every major decision in her military career. She had presented her case honestly and completely. Now Justice Harrison would weigh the competing claims about duty, discipline, and discretion. Justice Harrison announced that he would deliberate overnight and deliver his verdict the following morning. Elena spent another restless evening wondering about her future, but she also found herself thinking about the broader implications of the case. Whatever the judge decided would influence how security personnel approached their duties for years to come. The next morning, the courtroom was fuller than it had been during the testimony. Word had spread through military and security communities about the significance of the case. Elena recognized several senior officers from various units, all apparently interested in the precedent that Justice Harrison's decision would establish. At precisely 10 o'clock, Justice Harrison entered the courtroom. His expression remained neutral as he settled behind the bench and arranged his papers. Elena stood at attention, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. In the matter of the Crown versus Sergeant Elena Reeves, Justice Harrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. I have considered all testimony and evidence presented to this court. This case raises important questions about the balance between military discipline and professional judgment in security operations. The judge paused, consulting his notes. Elena felt her heart racing but maintained her military bearing. Everything she had worked for during her 23-year career would be determined by the next few minutes of this man's speech. The prosecution has correctly identified significant protocol violations in Sergeant Reeves' actions on November 15th. She did abandon her assigned post without authorization. She did fail to follow established procedures for reporting suspicious activity. These violations are not disputed and would normally warrant serious disciplinary action. Elena's heart sank as Justice Harrison methodically cataloged her failures to follow procedure. The judge's legal mind seemed to be organizing the case in terms of technical violations rather than practical results. However, Justice Harrison continued, this court must also consider the context and consequences of Sergeant Reeves' actions. The evidence clearly establishes that foreign operatives had penetrated palace security and were on the verge of completing a sophisticated surveillance operation that could have compromised sensitive diplomatic communications. The judge's tone remained neutral, but Elena detected a slight shift in emphasis. Perhaps he was going to consider the broader implications of her actions rather than focusing solely on protocol violations. The question before this court is whether Sergeant Reeves' decision to investigate and confront these operatives personally was reasonable given her training, experience, and the circumstances she encountered. This requires examining both her decision-making process and the alternatives available to her. Justice Harrison methodically reviewed Elena's testimony about her thought process that morning. Sergeant Reeves observed behavior that her extensive training identified as suspicious. She correctly assessed that radio communication might alert the subjects and allow them to escape or destroy evidence. She evaluated her own capabilities and determined that immediate intervention was feasible and necessary. The judge then addressed the prosecution's arguments about the importance of protocol. Military discipline is indeed essential to effective security operations. However, discipline must serve the ultimate mission rather than becoming an end in itself. The purpose of protocol is to enhance security effectiveness, not to prevent experienced professionals from protecting those they serve. Elena began to feel cautiously optimistic as Justice Harrison's analysis seemed to recognize the complexity of her situation. He wasn't dismissing the protocol violations, but he also wasn't treating them as automatically decisive. The court must also consider the standard by which professional judgment should be evaluated. Sergeant Reeves had 23 years of experience in protection duties, extensive training in threat assessment, and a spotless service record. Her assessment of the situation, while unconventional, was based on legitimate expertise applied to an unprecedented circumstance. Justice Harrison paused again, his gaze settling on Elena. The outcome of Sergeant Reeves' actions cannot be ignored in evaluating their reasonableness. For foreign operatives were successfully apprehended, sophisticated surveillance equipment was confiscated, and a potentially serious security breach was prevented. These results suggest that her assessment was fundamentally correct. The judge then addressed the broader implications of the case. This court is mindful that its decision will influence how security personnel approach similar situations in the future. We must strike a balance that maintains necessary discipline while preserving the flexibility that experienced professionals need to adapt to unexpected threats. Elena held her breath as Justice Harrison reached the crucial point of his decision. The packed courtroom was completely silent, everyone waiting to hear how the competing claims about duty and discretion would be resolved. Having considered all evidence and arguments, Justice Harrison declared, this court finds that while Sergeant Reeves technically violated established protocols, her actions were reasonable and necessary given the circumstances she encountered. The protocol violations, while regrettable, were justified by the immediate threat to national security and the successful prevention of a serious intelligence operation. Elena felt a surge of relief so powerful that she had to consciously maintain her military posture. Justice Harrison wasn't finished, however, and his next words would determine the practical consequences of his finding. Accordingly, this court finds Sergeant Elena Reeves not guilty of the charges brought against her. Her actions, while unconventional, demonstrated professional competence and dedication to duty that deserve recognition rather than punishment. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of applause and murmured conversation as observers reacted to the unexpected verdict. Elena remained at attention, overwhelmed by the realization that her career had been saved and her judgment vindicated. But Justice Harrison wasn't finished with his remarks. As the courtroom settled, he continued with observations that would prove even more significant than the verdict itself. This court wishes to make several additional observations about this case and its implications for military discipline and security operations, the judge continued. First, Sergeant Reeves' actions should not be interpreted as carte blanche for security personnel to disregard protocols whenever they deem it convenient. Her decision was justified by extraordinary circumstances, extensive training, and proven competence. The judge emphasized that Elena's case represented an exception rather than a new standard. Personnel considering similar actions should note that this verdict depended heavily on Sergeant Reeves' exceptional service record and the clear evidence of an immediate threat to national security. Lesser experience or less compelling circumstances might well result in different conclusions. Justice Harrison also addressed the systemic implications of the case. This incident reveals potential vulnerabilities in our security protocols that merit serious examination. While we cannot anticipate every possible threat scenario, security procedures should provide sufficient flexibility for experienced professionals to respond effectively to unprecedented situations. Elena was struck by the judge's recognition that her case highlighted broader security challenges rather than simply individual misconduct. The foreign operative's success in penetrating palace security suggested systematic problems that went beyond any individual's actions. Finally, Justice Harrison concluded, this court commends Sergeant Reeves for her courage and professional competence under extraordinary pressure. Her actions exemplify the highest traditions of military service and deserve the gratitude of all those committed to protecting our national security. As court adjourned, Elena was surrounded by congratulations from fellow service members and supporters who had attended the hearing. Colonel Williams was clearly pleased with the outcome, though he warned Elena that the controversy might continue despite her legal vindication. "You've won the legal battle," Williams observed, "but military politics can be more complicated than courtroom proceedings. Some officials may still view you as a troublemaker, regardless of what Justice Harrison decided." Elena understood the warning, but felt genuinely optimistic for the first time in months. Her actions had been vindicated by someone whose judgment carried real weight in military and legal circles. Whatever political consequences might follow, she had been officially recognized as acting properly under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. The immediate aftermath of the verdict brought a media attention that Elena found uncomfortable. Reporters wanted to interview the hero guard who had prevented a foreign intelligence operation, but Elena preferred to let her actions speak for themselves rather than seeking publicity. More significantly, the case attracted attention from senior military and intelligence officials who were interested in the broader lessons it revealed. Elena found herself invited to briefings where her experience was analyzed as a case study in threat assessment and crisis response. Commander Richards, who had testified about her protocol violations, approached Elena after the verdict with an unexpected offer. "Sergeant Reeves," he said, "I'd like you to consider participating in a review of our security procedures. Your experience has highlighted some gaps in our protocols that need to be addressed." Elena was intrigued by the possibility of contributing to improved security measures. Her ordeal had revealed weaknesses in existing procedures that could potentially be exploited by future threats. If her experience could help prevent similar vulnerabilities, the entire controversy might ultimately serve a constructive purpose. The review process that followed would prove to be one of the most intellectually challenging experiences of Elena's career. Working with experts from various security services, she helped analyze how existing protocols might be modified to provide greater flexibility without sacrificing coordination and discipline. The foreign operatives' method of penetrating palace security became a particular focus of attention. Their use of false maintenance credentials and knowledge of service corridors suggested either inside assistance or extremely thorough reconnaissance. Either possibility had serious implications for future security planning. Elena's role in the review process also brought her into contact with intelligence analysts who provided broader context for the surveillance operation she had disrupted. The equipment confiscated from the operatives was apparently more sophisticated than initially realized, capable of intercepting and analyzing communications across multiple frequency ranges. "Your intervention prevented more than just eavesdropping on a few diplomatic conversations," one analyst explained. "This equipment could have compromised our communications security for months, potentially exposing intelligence sources and methods to hostile services." The strategic implications of Elena's actions continued to expand as analysts examined the captured equipment and interrogated the operatives. What had seemed like a relatively straightforward surveillance attempt proved to be part of a broader intelligence operation targeting British diplomatic communications. Elena's vindication in court was followed by recognition from unexpected sources. Senior royals, who had remained publicly silent during the controversy, privately expressed their appreciation for her dedication and sound judgment. The Queen herself sent a personal note thanking Elena for her service and expressing confidence in her continued duties. More practically, Elena's superiors began consulting her on security matters with a new level of respect. Her proven ability to identify and respond to sophisticated threats made her insights valuable in planning protection for future high-profile events. The case also influenced military training programs, with Elena's experience being incorporated into scenarios designed to help security personnel balance protocol compliance with tactical flexibility. Her decision-making process became a teaching tool for helping others navigate similar situations. As weeks passed, Elena settled back into her regular duties with a renewed sense of purpose. The controversy had been exhausting and stressful, but it had also demonstrated that the system could recognize and reward sound professional judgment even when it conflicted with technical regulations. Her relationships with fellow guards evolved in interesting ways. Some treated her as a minor celebrity, impressed by her courage in facing both foreign operatives and military justice. Others remained skeptical, worried that her vindication might encourage dangerous freelancing by less experienced personnel. Elena tried to address these concerns by emphasizing the extraordinary circumstances that had justified her actions. In conversations with junior guards, she stressed that protocol violations should be rare exceptions rather than routine adaptations, undertaken only when immediate action was necessary to prevent serious harm. The long-term impact of Justice Harrison's decision began to emerge as other security personnel faced similar dilemmas in subsequent incidents. While Elena's case didn't create a blanket authorization for protocol violations, it did establish legal recognition that experienced professionals might sometimes need to exercise independent judgment. Elena found herself occasionally consulted when other guards faced difficult decisions about balancing protocols with practical security needs. Her experience had made her a resource for helping others think through complex situations where technical regulations might conflict with operational requirements. The foreign operatives were eventually prosecuted and convicted, receiving substantial prison sentences for espionage activities. Their trials revealed additional details about their operation and confirmed that Elena's intervention had prevented a significant intelligence coup that could have damaged British diplomatic and security interests. Elena's story also attracted attention from military historians interested in how individual initiative had shaped security operations throughout history. Some compared her actions to famous incidents where individual soldiers had changed the course of battles by taking independent action when circumstances demanded immediate response. This historical perspective helped Elena understand her experience as part of a broader tradition of military professionalism that balanced discipline with initiative. The best soldiers throughout history had been those who could follow orders effectively while also adapting to unexpected situations that required creative responses. As the immediate controversy faded, Elena reflected on the personal growth that had resulted from her ordeal. The months of uncertainty and legal proceedings had tested her resilience and forced her to examine her own values and priorities more deeply than ever before. She had learned that doing the right thing sometimes required accepting significant personal risk. Her decision to confront the foreign operatives could have ended her career even if it had been tactically successful. Standing by that decision through months of legal proceedings had required a different kind of courage than facing physical danger. Elena also gained appreciation for the complexity of modern security operations. Her case had revealed how legal, political, and practical considerations could conflict in ways that made simple judgments about right and wrong difficult to reach. The same action could be viewed as heroic or irresponsible depending on perspective and priorities. Most importantly, Elena learned that vindication was possible even in seemingly hopeless situations. Justice Harrison's careful analysis of her case had demonstrated that thoughtful evaluation of complex circumstances could recognize the difference between reckless disregard for authority and reasonable adaptation to extraordinary challenges. As her second year after the trial began, Elena found herself in an unexpectedly prominent position within the Royal Guard. Her experience and proven judgment had made her an informal mentor for other personnel facing difficult situations, and her insights were increasingly sought by senior commanders planning security operations. The transformation from controversy to respected expertise had been gradual but unmistakable. What had begun as a career-threatening crisis had evolved into an opportunity to contribute to improved security practices and help other professionals navigate the complex challenges of modern protection work. Elena's story was becoming part of the institutional memory of the Royal Guard, a reminder that effective security sometimes required individual courage and sound judgment in addition to disciplined adherence to established procedures. Future generations of guards would learn from her example about balancing competing demands and making difficult decisions under pressure. The morning mist hung heavy over Westminster as Sergeant Elena Reeves adjusted her scarlet tunic one final time. 23 years she had worn this uniform, 23 years of standing guard over the royal family with unwavering dedication. Today felt different, though. Today, she would face questions that could end everything she had worked for. The summons had arrived 3 weeks earlier, delivered by a stern-faced clerk from the High Court. Her Majesty's Guard Sergeant Elena Reeves is hereby commanded to appear before Justice Harrison regarding allegations of misconduct during the state visit of President Kowalski. The words had burned into her memory like a brand. Elena walked through the palace corridors one last time before her hearing. These halls had been her second home for over 2 decades. She knew every portrait, every carpet pattern, every creak in the ancient floorboards. Fellow guards nodded respectfully as she passed. Some offered encouraging words. Others simply pressed her shoulder in silent support. The allegations against her were serious. During the Polish president's state visit 6 months ago, Elena had allegedly abandoned her post to pursue what witnesses called a personal vendetta. Security cameras had captured her leaving her assigned position near the grand staircase and moving toward the east wing. What happened next had become the subject of intense scrutiny. Captain Morrison, her commanding officer, had tried to prepare her for what lay ahead. Justice Harrison is known for his thorough examinations, he had warned. He doesn't accept simple explanations. You'll need to be precise, honest, and ready for anything. Elena appreciated his concern, but she also detected something else in his voice, doubt. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock at the Royal Courts of Justice. Elena had visited the imposing Victorian building only once before, as a young recruit learning about military law. The Gothic towers and ornate stonework had seemed intimidating then. Now, they felt like monuments to judgment itself. As she prepared to leave the palace, Elena's mind drifted to the events of that November day. President Kowalski had arrived for a 3-day state visit, complete with all the ceremonial pomp the royal household could provide. Elena had been assigned to the inner security cordon, a position of high trust that reflected her exemplary service record. The trouble began during the official welcome ceremony. Elena had noticed something that didn't belong, a man in a maintenance uniform moving through areas where no maintenance was scheduled. Her training kicked in immediately. 23 years of protecting the royal family had taught her to trust her instincts above all else. Protocol demanded she report the anomaly through proper channels. A radio call to the Security Command Center would have been the correct procedure. Instead, Elena had made a decision that would haunt her for months. She chose to investigate personally. Following the maintenance worker through the palace's maze-like service corridors, Elena discovered something that chilled her to the bone. The man wasn't alone. 3 others waited in a storage room near the state dining room, where President Kowalski would soon attend an official luncheon. They were assembling what appeared to be surveillance equipment, sophisticated devices that had no business in the royal residence. Elena faced a split-second decision. Her radio was in her hand, backup was minutes away, but these intruders were already in position to compromise the president's security. She could call for help and risk them escaping or destroying evidence. Or she could act immediately. What happened next would be dissected frame by frame in Justice Harrison's courtroom. Elena burst into the storage room, weapon drawn, ordering the 4 men to surrender. The lead intruder, the false maintenance worker, reached for something at his waist. Elena fired a warning shot into the ceiling, a decision that probably saved his life. The confrontation lasted less than 3 minutes. By the time palace security arrived, Elena had the 4 intruders secured and their equipment confiscated. Initial examination revealed state-of-the-art listening devices, clearly intended to monitor the private conversations between Her Majesty and President Kowalski. The men were identified as operatives from a hostile intelligence service. Their mission had been to gather compromising information during the state visit, potentially damaging relations between Britain and Poland. Elena's intervention had prevented a significant diplomatic incident. So why was she facing a judicial hearing instead of receiving commendations? The answer lay in the complexity of modern security protocols. By abandoning her assigned post, Elena had technically violated standing orders. The fact that she had prevented a security breach was, according to some officials, irrelevant to the question of her discipline. Rules existed for reasons, they argued, and even good outcomes couldn't justify breaking them. The political implications were equally complex. The presence of foreign operatives in the palace raised uncomfortable questions about security vulnerabilities. Some officials preferred to focus on Elena's protocol violation rather than examine how 4 armed intruders had penetrated the royal residence. Public opinion, when the story eventually leaked to the press, was divided. Some viewed Elena as a hero who had protected national security at personal cost. Others worried about guards who took matters into their own hands, regardless of their motivations. The royal household found itself caught between supporting a dedicated servant maintaining strict operational discipline. Justice Harrison's reputation added another layer of uncertainty to Elena's situation. Known for his meticulous attention to detail and strict interpretation of military law, he had presided over several high-profile cases involving service personnel. His decisions were rarely overturned on appeal, but they were also rarely popular with the accused. As Elena made her way to the courthouse, she reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. Born in Liverpool to a working-class family, she had joined the army at 18 with dreams of serving her country. The opportunity to join the Royal Guard had been the pinnacle of her military career, a position that required not just physical capability, but absolute moral integrity. Her service record was spotless. Commendations for bravery during conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. Letters of appreciation from senior royals for her discretion and professionalism. A reputation among her peers as someone who could be trusted with any responsibility, no matter how sensitive. Now all of that was at risk because of 30 seconds of independent decision-making. The courtroom was smaller than Elena had expected, wood-paneled, and austere in typical British legal fashion. Justice Harrison sat behind an elevated bench, his white wig and black robes lending him an air of absolute authority. The prosecution table was occupied by a young barrister who looked barely old enough to have finished law school. Elena's military-appointed defender, Colonel Williams, had warned her that appearances could be deceiving. Sergeant Reeves. Justice Harrison's voice carried clearly through the quiet courtroom. You stand accused of abandoning your post, failing to follow established security protocols, and endangering the safety of protected persons through unauthorized actions. How do you plead? Elena stood at attention, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Not guilty, Your Honor. The prosecution's opening statement painted Elena as a rogue operator whose actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, represented a dangerous precedent. Military discipline exists to ensure coordinated responses to threats, the young barrister argued. Individual initiative, however, successful in this instance, undermines the entire security framework that protects our most important institutions. Colonel Williams countered with a more nuanced argument. Elena's actions, he maintained, were not violations of protocol, but intelligent adaptations to an unprecedented situation. Sergeant Reeves faced a threat that existing protocols had not anticipated. Her training and experience told her that immediate action was necessary, and subsequent events proved her assessment correct. The first witness called was Commander Richards, the palace security chief. A career intelligence officer with decades of experience, Richards had been responsible for coordinating the president's protection during the state visit. His testimony would be crucial in establishing whether Elena's actions were justified or reckless. Commander Richards, the prosecution began. Please describe the security arrangements in place for President Kowalski's visit. Richards outlined a comprehensive protection plan involving multiple agencies. Palace guards, Metropolitan Police, diplomatic security, and intelligence services had all contributed to creating what he called layered defenses around the visiting dignitary. Each component had specific responsibilities, and coordination between them was essential. Was Sergeant Reeves briefed on her specific duties? The prosecutor continued. Yes, she was assigned to the inner cordon around the grand staircase. Her responsibility was to monitor and control access to the state apartments during the welcome ceremony. And did she fulfill those responsibilities? Richards paused, choosing his words carefully. Sergeant Reeves left her assigned position at approximately 11:30 hours to investigate what she described as suspicious activity. The prosecutor pounced on this admission, leaving her post without authorization, contrary to established protocol? Technically, yes. Elena watched the exchange with growing concern. Richards wasn't being deliberately hostile, but his testimony was damaging her case with every answer. The technical violations were undeniable, even if the context made them more complex than they appeared. Colonel Williams rose for cross-examination, his approach more thoughtful than aggressive. Commander Richards, in your experience, how often do security plans encounter unexpected situations? Frequently. No plan survives contact with reality unchanged. And when unexpected situations arise, what guidance do you give to personnel regarding independent judgment? Richards shifted slightly, his discomfort evident. Personnel are expected to use their training and experience to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining coordination with command structures. Would you say that Sergeant Reeves demonstrated good judgment in identifying the threat posed by the false maintenance worker? Yes, her observation skills were exemplary, and her assessment that immediate action was necessary. Was that reasonable given what she had observed? The prosecutor objected before Richards could answer, arguing that the question called for speculation. Justice Harrison sustained the objection, but Elena noticed that the judge was taking detailed notes. He was clearly paying close attention to the nuances of the testimony. The next witness was Inspector Davies from the Metropolitan Police Counterterrorism Unit. His role had been to coordinate with palace security in identifying and neutralizing potential threats during the state visit. His testimony focused on the intelligence background leading up to the president's arrival. Inspector Davies, Colonel Williams, began his examination. Were there specific threats known to your unit regarding the Polish president's visit? There were several credible intelligence reports suggesting possible surveillance attempts by hostile services. We had increased monitoring of known operatives in London. Was the palace security made aware of these threats? General threat assessments were shared, yes, including the possibility of surveillance equipment being placed within the palace itself. Davies hesitated. That was considered a low-probability scenario given our security screening procedures. Elena felt a spark of hope. If the police had been aware of surveillance threats, her actions might be seen as a reasonable response to known risks rather than paranoid overreaction. The prosecution tried to minimize this testimony during their cross-examination. Inspector Davies, did your intelligence specifically identify the 4 individuals apprehended by Sergeant Reeves? No, they were not previously known to our services. So Sergeant Reeves could not have been acting on specific intelligence about these particular operatives? Correct. The legal maneuvering continued through the morning, with each side attempting to frame Elena's actions in the most favorable light. The prosecution emphasized her protocol violations and the potential chaos that could result if every guard made independent decisions. The defense focused on the successful outcome and Elena's demonstrated competence throughout her career. During the lunch recess, Elena met with Colonel Williams in a small conference room adjacent to the courthouse. Her defender was cautiously optimistic, but warned against overconfidence. Justice Harrison is paying attention to the details, Williams observed. He's not dismissing your actions out of hand, but he's also not showing any obvious sympathy. This afternoon's testimony could be decisive. The afternoon session would feature Elena's own account of the events. She had practiced her testimony repeatedly, but facing Justice Harrison's questioning in person would be entirely different from rehearsals. Everything she had worked for during her military career would depend on her ability to explain 30 seconds of decision-making that had occurred 6 months earlier. As the court reconvened, Elena noticed several new faces in the gallery. Word of the hearing had apparently spread, drawing observers from various military and intelligence services. The stakes of this case extended beyond her personal fate. The verdict could influence how security personnel approach their duties in future incidents. Sergeant Reeves, Justice Harrison called, his voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. Please take the witness stand. Elena walked forward, her bearing reflecting decades of military training. She had faced enemy fire, protected royalty through public appearances, and served with distinction in some of the world's most dangerous places. But somehow, this moment felt more challenging than any previous test of her courage. The oath administered, she faced Colonel Williams for direct examination. Her defender began with background questions designed to establish her credibility and experience. Elena's service record spoke for itself, but Williams wanted the judge to understand the depth of training and judgment that had informed her actions that November day. Sergeant Reeves, how long have you served in the Royal Guard? 23 years, sir. And, during that time, have you received specialized training in threat assessment and response? Yes, sir. Continuous training in personal protection, threat identification, emergency procedures, and tactical response. Williams methodically established Elena's credentials, creating a foundation for his argument that her actions represented professional competence rather than reckless independence. Elena answered each question clearly and concisely, her military bearing evident throughout. Now, Sergeant Reeves, please describe what you observed on the morning of November 15th that caused you concern. Elena took a deep breath and began her account of that pivotal day. At approximately 11:25 hours, I observed an individual in maintenance coveralls moving through the East Wing corridor. This was unusual because no maintenance activities were scheduled for that area during the state visit. What did you do initially? I observed the individual more closely. His behavior was inconsistent with routine maintenance work. He appeared to be conducting surveillance rather than performing repairs or inspections. Did you consider radioing for instructions at that point? This was the crucial question. Elena's answer would either justify her subsequent actions or condemn them. Yes, sir. However, I assessed that radioing would potentially alert the individual to my observation and allow him to escape or abort his mission before security could respond effectively. Williams continued building Elena's case, establishing that her decision to investigate personally was based on professional judgment rather than impulsive action. Elena described following the maintenance worker, discovering the three accomplices, and confronting the team before they could complete their surveillance installation. Sergeant Reeves, when you entered that storage room and found 4 individuals with what appeared to be surveillance equipment, what was your primary concern? The immediate security of President Kowalski and Her Majesty, sir. These individuals had penetrated palace security and were in position to monitor private conversations during the state visit. And your decision to confront them directly rather than calling for backup? Sir, they were already in position and appeared to be completing their mission. Any delay would have allowed them to escape or destroy evidence. I assessed that immediate intervention was necessary to protect the security interests of the Crown. The prosecution's cross-examination was more aggressive, focusing relentlessly on the protocol violations. The young barrister seemed determined to establish that good outcomes could not excuse unauthorized actions. Sergeant Reeves, you have acknowledged that your assigned position on November 15th was the grand staircase area, correct? Yes. And you have acknowledged that you left that position without authorization? Yes, but thank you. That's sufficient. You have also acknowledged that established protocol required you to report suspicious activity through radio communication to the command center. Elena felt frustrated by the prosecutor's refusal to allow context. Yes, however. Again, that's sufficient. Now, Sergeant Reeves, are you suggesting that your 23 years of experience give you the authority to disregard direct orders when you see fit? This question struck at the heart of military discipline. Elena understood that her answer would resonate far beyond her individual case. Sir, I believe that military training and experience create an obligation to protect those under our care, even when that requires difficult decisions. Even when those decisions violate explicit orders? When those decisions serve the greater good of the mission, yes, sir. The prosecutor pressed harder, attempting to establish a pattern of insubordination. Have you previously disregarded orders during your military career? No, sir. So this was the first time you decided that your personal judgment superseded established command authority? Elena felt the weight of the question, but maintained her composure. Sir, this was the first time I encountered a situation where immediate action was necessary to prevent a significant security breach. Justice Harrison interjected with his own questions, focusing on the technical details of Elena's decision-making process. Sergeant Reeves, walk me through the specific factors you considered when you chose to investigate personally rather than radio for instructions. Elena organized her thoughts carefully. This might be her only opportunity to explain her reasoning directly to the judge. Your Honor, several factors influenced my decision. First, the individual's behavior was clearly suspicious and inconsistent with authorized maintenance activity. Second, the timing coincided with the President's movement toward areas where surveillance could be most damaging. Third, any radio communication would have been audible to anyone monitoring security frequencies, potentially alerting the intruders. Fourth, my position allowed me to maintain observation while backup would have had to approach from positions where they could be detected. And you felt confident in your ability to handle whatever you might encounter? Your Honor, my training includes close-quarters combat, tactical response to multiple threats, and evidence preservation. I assessed that I could manage the situation while minimizing risk to the primary mission. Justice Harrison made additional notes, his expression unreadable. Elena couldn't tell whether her explanations were convincing or simply digging her deeper into trouble. The formal language of the courtroom made it difficult to convey the split-second nature of her decision-making that day. The final witnesses were the 4 operatives themselves, testifying via secure video link from prison. Their accounts provided additional context for Elena's actions, though their credibility was obviously compromised by their own criminal behavior. The lead operative, identified only as witness for security reasons, confirmed that their mission had been to install surveillance equipment capable of monitoring high-level diplomatic conversations. His testimony revealed the sophistication of their operation and the potential damage that could have resulted from success. "How long had your team been planning this operation?" Colonel Williams asked during his cross-examination. "Several months. We had conducted extensive reconnaissance of palace security procedures and identified vulnerabilities in the service corridor access. And if Sergeant Reeves had not intervened when she did, would you have successfully completed your mission?" "Probably yes. We were nearly finished with the installation when she discovered us." This admission provided crucial support for Elena's defense. The operatives had been on the verge of succeeding in their mission when her intervention prevented what could have been a significant intelligence coup for a hostile foreign service. As the day's testimony concluded, Elena felt emotionally drained but cautiously hopeful. Her account had been consistent and detailed, and the evidence supported her assessment that immediate action had been necessary. However, Justice Harrison's strict reputation meant that technical violations might still outweigh practical results. Colonel Williams seemed pleased with how the testimony had proceeded. "You did well," he told Elena as they prepared to leave the courthouse. "Tomorrow we'll bring closing arguments, and then we wait for Justice Harrison's decision." Elena spent that evening walking through London's quiet streets, thinking about her future. If the verdict went against her, she would likely face dismissal from the Royal Guard and potential criminal charges. If vindicated, she might return to her duties, but the controversy would probably follow her for the rest of her career. The stakes extended beyond her personal situation. Other security personnel would be watching this case closely, trying to understand how much independent judgment they were allowed when facing unexpected threats. A conviction might make guards more hesitant to take initiative when quick action was needed. An acquittal might encourage others to disregard protocols when they felt it was justified. As she returned to her small apartment near the palace, Elena reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this point. 23 years of faithful service, condensed into a single moment of decision that would define her legacy. Tomorrow would determine whether her career ended in disgrace or continued with the recognition that sometimes protecting others required taking calculated risks.